Welcome to the Game of Thrones podcast, the officially unofficial podcast for Game of Thrones on HBO. I'm Jim.
I'm Aaron.
And we're talking about Season 8, Episode 3 again. Again, we're talking about it. This time it's the SpoiLore edition. Aaron, what do we have today?
Spoiler, my opinion on the episode is largely unchanged. Like I said on the instant take, it's a lot to think and absorb. And as a book reader and a show watcher, both, and I'm someone who spent a lot of time invested in thinking about the intricate plot that we've got here, it was a lot to think about. And I thought, you know what we should do? We should call our old buddy Kim Renfro, because she's kind of got similar amounts of investment as us, and she's even, I think, usually got her ear closer to the ground on the production side, and I kind of wanted to see what she thought, so we're going to do that right now. Okay, let's get to feedback, Jim. As always, you can send that in to gameofthrones@baldmove.com or discuss it with your fellow fans on forums.baldmove.com as well. A couple things, I guess, before I get to feedback. There's some things that I collectively wanted to talk about, because there's just a lot of variations of the theory that things aren't over with the Night King.
Okay. Is this wishful thinking on the part of fans of the series, or does this have a lot of weight to it?
Well, that's the thing. Some of them do. Like I'm going to consider a couple of them. Some of them I think maybe like I honestly after because the thing is like these things don't occur in a vacuum, and if you heard for like our conversation with Kim. After that, I'm actually even more on the side of like the Double Ds are just going to do their own thing this season, have some fun, do some spectacle and get the hell out of here so they can get on to their Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
But I think that if in a universe where like the behind the scenes of like episodes of Game of Thrones don't exist and you can't hear their own words saying, you know, this is what we wanted to do, and we wanted to subvert this, and this is what we thought would be cool, then maybe, but, like, we do live in that world, so I don't find it very persuasive, but it's a possibility. I think what's really happening is you've got, like, this is the denial stage of some of these people's grief, and, coming to grips with the fact that, like, this isn't going to go the way we hoped it was going to go, or maybe we thought it was going to go to because of our pet theories or whatever. Like, I think it's more of that. But maybe some of them are at least interesting to talk about. But there's one in particular that was in the feedback, and I've seen going around Reddit, is that Jon shouted "Go" during his final confrontation with the dragon, which
like a Pokemon,
which gave Arya a split second to sneak past the dragon. Because there's a lot of people that's problem with Arya killing is the fact that
they want the assist from Jon.
Yeah, they want to somehow. They're like, okay, somehow one of the princes or princesses that were promised need to get involved in here, and they're looking for a way. There's a couple scenes that I rewatched to verify some feedback. First of all, I think this is just not.
Is it in the subtitles?
No.
Okay, well, I think that's your answer.
Yeah, I don't think it was intended. It's no. I'm sorry. That's
subtitles are pretty definitive, I think.
That's certainly wishful thinking. But then some of these other Night King kind of reboot theories we'll talk about in the fullness of time. Charlie F has a point. I want to bring to light another book call out in this episode, just like last episode of the Ginny of Oldstones. When Lyanna Mormont has her last stand with the giant having a blue eye because he's a white, I feel like the focus on his eye was a hinting to the blue eye of Macumber legend in the books. Nice little touch of Westeros theology.
I have never heard of this story.
Well, this is funny. This is a funny story because when Anthony and I were writing the books, we were like brainstorming like all the different connections as we were breaking each chapter, and we were doing the one on the Night King and the others and like the relations to Norse mythology. And at the time, if you recall, we had just played through like God of War, which is all about like a tour of the Norse mythology, and you know that there's the legend is there's this particular giant that died, and like the world is formed from his corpse, and there's like a level in God of Thrones God of War.
This is all very confusing with the naming,
right? Where you're like traversing through this giant's body and into his skull and all that stuff, and how that like, and me and Anthony like, oh, that kind of ties into the Macumber theory, which we had. Turns out we had the, you know, the moment where people like find out Berenstain Bears is spelled differently than they think, and
Right.
instead of thinking, oh, I was wrong, you actually envision an entire universe where all these. We had, because like we swore that this was something that had to do with the books, and it was a sly reference to Martin, who himself has blue eyes, like that this is all contained within a giant, so this all came out of his head. And I started like researching it, and I realized that it was all bullshit. Like, there's one line in the show where they talk about, like, I think it's Tyrion and Jaime talk about, like, oh, maybe the world, and there's none of that in the books. George Martin has brown eyes, not blue eyes. Like, everything that we were starting to build this theory on was completely based on bullshit. So I'm not making fun of you, Charlie. I'm just sharing in your...
This sounds like the gaffe that we made last spoiler podcast, confusing the names of people, right? Like, oh, well... You take a piece of information, you run with it, not realizing the root of that information is flawed.
Right. Yes,
and
exactly.
And then you extrapolate all these different worlds that could exist. And
it's like you remember Macumber, and it's just a weird reference from the show, so you assume it must be in the books. And then if it's in the books, then it's like, well, that'd be an interesting author self-insert. And of course, why wouldn't Martin have blue eyes? He's... I don't know. I can't remember ever seeing his eyes. He's a squinty kind of guy. But yeah, no, it's all bullshit. So... just want to put that out there in case anyone else has that brainworm. Okay, Matt M. During the long nights, where were the Knights of the Vale? I didn't see them or Jan Royce on the battlefield. Do you think they're kept in reserve, which might have made sense? Have them hidden a short distance from Winterfell when the Night King forces were engaged at the castle's walls. They come around and attack from the rear.
You mean somebody with a cavalry knows what to do with cavalry?
Yeah. Royce was in episode 2, so I assume they're still around. I mean... You saw them on the battlefield. There was tons of those shields with the bird, the hawk, the eagle sigil of the Vale. So they were there. It's just they weren't on horseback for some reason, or maybe they were like in the middle of the Dothraki crowd. They just like fought in because
they got swept up in the fervor too, and just
or maybe the Double D's forgot that the Vale's actually a lot of mounted cavalry. I don't know. Cavalry.
That seems like a tough thing to forget.
Well,
especially when you base a huge event in the show on it.
I will. Okay. Well, I keep on wanting to jump ahead to the other stuff. I'm going to continue to follow my outline, sir. Julie J, did you notice what looks like Alice Stark going into the Godswood of the Ironborn? If so, it looks like the Karstarks are also finished, along with the Mormonts and Umbers, and we assume the Glovers. Even if the North is given independence, there won't be anyone left. That would be a funny thing if the succession thing is solved by Dany letting Jon be the king of the North, and he has like 3 people. It's him and Arya and Bran and Sansa.
Yeah.
So. No, I actually watched this scene too, and I think I know maybe a person or two you could be talking about, but it's dark and it's hard to tell, and it's a scene in motion. So I don't know why Alice Karstark would be fighting with the Ironborn, but I also think we're to understand that the North is just fucking, decimated that's just killing 1 out of 10. It's like ninth-amated.
Right.
It's like 90% of the people are dead, and. I think it's because a lot of people are like, oh, what do you do without these great houses? And like, well, there's a precedent because it's pretty clear that like in the other Long Night, this happened again. And all these houses that are of like great renown, like the Stark, who knows? They all these great houses could have been like cadet branches of the Starks, or like maybe even the Starks weren't that big. These are all just a bunch of like loosely affiliated First Men kings banding together children of forest, and they later became the Starks and the Glovers and the Umbers. So give them a few thousand years. Maybe they'll get into skyscrapers and they'll invent democracy and they won't have kings and queens anymore. But I don't know how much they're actually going to give weight. Like, is there going to ever be a point in a story where like the show itself reflects about like, God damn, 90% of North is just gone now.
I would hope it would be next episode, if ever.
Yeah. Or like maybe a final episode where they deal with, because there's still some people saying like, oh, well, the Double Ds want to pay off Martin's attempts to like wanting to know what happened after Aragorn started. No, that's clearly not going to happen, right?
Is there time to do that?
You're not going to get a 60-minute episode of just Queen Daenerys' tax policy and how she integrates.
You would need a whole nother season for that.
the remaining Northerners and Wildlings and Dothraki into some united Northern culture. It's just...
What about a flash forward? What about 1,000-year flash forward?
There you go.
And we see what the tree that the roots of Dany have grown.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That seems like a bad way to take the series out.
Yeah, I thought about something really funny to say, but it would involve spoiling in game, and that tends to get people salty. The first with it not even been out for a week.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Albert H. Is the downfall of the Night King, in the downfall of the Night King, he and his generals scattered into ice cubes, and it seems all the whites just collapsed. If I remember correctly, Viserion also crumpled into a heap. Would there be a possibility in future episodes that they would harvest materials from the Ice Dragon? How badass would it be to have Arya in some awesome Ice Dragon leather armor? How many swords and dagger hilts could be made from the Ice Dragon bones? The possibilities are endless of what you can create from a dead dragon.
Let me ask you this. Which do you think is sturdier? Dragon Ice or Dragon Glass?
Probably Dragon Glass, right?
I would think so, yeah.
I mean,
because you can take Dragon Glass into the heat.
Yeah,
Dragon
true.
Ice
That's true.
it'll just melt.
Yeah, you just need to be a room temperature to defeat that.
Yeah, shit, my armor's melting again. I got to get in the ice box.
This does sound like some kind of weird Skyrim mod.
It really does, yeah.
Right? Like let Arya wear Ice Dragon armor.
Mm-hmm.
This was
shit, man. Bethesda should just freaking make a Game of Thrones game.
I'm surprised.
That could be amazing.
I'm surprised there haven't been more Game of Thrones video games.
There have been attempts, but they're not great.
Yeah, and then it's like the Telltale stuff, which is essentially a storybook, choose your own adventure. And there's been a couple mobile apps, I think. Mm-hmm. But why can't we get Battle of the Five Kings?
I think it'd be awesome.
I've spawned several really excellent board games, I thought. But it seems like there should be a real-time tactical or strategic thing or something like that. But Vanessa W. I'd started a draft last week of a comment I had about Dany, but after episode 3, I'm just throwing up my hands and saying, what the F? Arya kills the Night King. We have all that build-up about Jon's parentage, all the references to Azor Ahai, all the deaths of characters like Jojen, Reed, and Shireen, and for what? Nothing? Rhaegar's belief that he needed a third child to be the head of the dragon, that he needed to father the prince that was promised, leading to Robert's rebellion, and ultimately the downfall of so many great houses was for nothing. All the lore from Gurm's books just gets thrown out the window. We know nothing about the Night King's motives, but apparently that's not important because he was some meaningless bad guy. I think we talked about this in the Kim Renfro interview, but if not, this is an off-air conversation we had where she pointed out, it's like, okay, pump the brakes. It's not that this didn't matter, because without Dany and Jon, Arya would not have the chance. So if you want to, by our powers combined, if not for Arya, if not for Bran, if not for Jon, none of these things would have occurred in the same place to allow Arya to strike with her knife. So they've already been to our powers combined. They just happened over the previous 7 seasons. So that's a fine take if you want to step back and be like, okay, it's not as bad as we all think. But then Katie had some interesting ideas of how maybe with a little bit of dialogue in the next episode that this could be a little bit more lore happy or lore friendly. She says, do you think the dagger will play the same role in the book? She's talking about the cat's paw dagger that Bran got and then gave to Arya. The path of the dagger is probably one of the most successfully executed aspects of the story that weaves throughout the entire series. The mirroring of the knife sent to Bran, or kill Bran, being the knife that saves Bran is great. The fact that Littlefinger uses the knife as a linchpin that he pulls to start the whole War of the Five Kings and is ultimately executed by that same knife for his crimes is very satisfying. It would certainly make sense if this is how it goes down in the books. But the last we hear of the knife in the books is Cersei, Tyrion, and Jaime have come to the conclusion that Joffrey sent it to kill Bran, parenthetically to impress his father. Of course, this doesn't necessarily make it true because we don't get hard proof. Do you think the knife ultimately has the same greater meaning in A Song of Ice and Fire, and have the double D's credited the path of the dagger to Gurm? And I have one more email that chains off this one to make it even more awesome. But if you want to stop and comment here, that's cool.
Let's hear the extension on it too.
So Jenny's contribution is, I have to share a great book theory that could possibly play into the show. There is a theory that the Valyrian dagger is actually all that's left of the sword Dark Sister, which was one of the famed Targaryen blades. You have Blackfire, which is the main one that Aegon wielded, and then his warrior sister Visenya wielded Dark Sister. As you might know, Visenya is Arya's hero, and she speaks of her when talking to Tywin about when she was his cupbearer. Not only is Arya truly the Dark Sister of House Stark, but also she's the last known whereabouts of the blade was that it was owned by Brynden Rivers, who, of course, is the three-eyed raven that trained Bran. And I first thought, like, when I got these emails, I'm like, a dagger? Like, we're talking about, like, I don't think, Dark Sister wasn't a great sword, but it's like a hand and a half type of bastard sword. It's like, how the fuck you get a dagger out of that? But I remember what they did to Ned Sword Ice.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, like, I was thinking, like, what is, like, a broken sword, like that Narsil sword from Lord of the Rings that gets...
Oh,
like,
you just, like, cut a piece of it off?
There's a shard of it, but, like...
Yeah, you can melt it down and reforge it.
Reforge it. Or even if it is, like, a shard, I'm thinking, like, well, it'd have this big... But no, they could take the hilt off and just work that into a new blade. If you're looking for kind of, like, overarching... If you want to tell yourself a story of how all this stuff matters and is more connected...
Yeah.
I think there's a nice little plot there. And I also think there is a small chance that maybe there will be some reflecting of that in this next kind of... I'm assuming this next episode is going to be like a pause to catch your breath to set up the next epic thing, the Southern War type of episode. Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting theory. I think certainly the first part of that duo of emails I 100% agree with. I think this knife has been, a key pivotal... played a pivotal role in the entire series so far, and it's kind of impressive how they've woven that through the story.
Yeah.
I think it's even cooler if it turns out to be that Brynden as this previous three-eyed raven is doing this multi-generational sort of scheming. He's putting the dagger in the right place to where it needs to be. Maybe not physically or not with his own hand, but he's maneuvering things sort of like Bran maneuvers things to get to the end point that he sees. I think that's even cooler. And if they can do something to kind of tell us that through Bran in the show in the next few episodes, then that would be awesome.
And that's the thing, because there's also theories about the three-eyed raven has been at work for almost a century trying to guide the Targaryen dynasty to the point that they would be able to produce the prince that was promised, and also to maneuver this new three-eyed raven in his place. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff there. The problem is, like, I can see all these pieces laying on the floor, but I'm not going to pick them up and put them together for Dan and David.
No, they have to do that.
They because otherwise they're just kids playing with toys, and they threw them down on the ground in an interesting pattern. Like.
Sure.
Like the show, like, and it's so weird because there's a tension between, we're always saying, well, we prefer when shows show, not tell. But sometimes you got to tell. Sometimes you got to pat yourself on the back and say, like, oh, look at this smart thing I did.
Yeah, but showing is also telling in most circircumstances, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're both conveying information.
Right.
It's just how you convey that information. And
right.
so far, they haven't... They have tried to convey that first piece of information, but not the theories that we're talking about in the second half of that.
Right. I mean, because, like, the fact that this dagger started the war...
Yeah.
Ended the Great War, killed Littlefinger.
It's awesome. I love it.
It's awesome, but, like, again, I think the show, if they intended that, they need to kind of, like, take their hat off and wave it around a bit. So, or else there's going to be I mean, if you have to get all this shit from an insider article, then the vast majority of the people are not going to see it and appreciate it. But if you have to read this on a Reddit post,
Did we need to, though? I mean, I thought it tracked pretty cleanly.
Does
this dagger is a very recognizable weapon.
But you say that because you host a podcast where we've been talking about it for weeks? Or,
probably.
So we've got one of the bigger podcasts on the planet, but for Game of Thrones, but it's still, like, not even 1% of the total fan base from last season, So,
right.
So,
for
like,
Game of Thrones, certainly.
Yeah, I do think that... it should be a little bit more accessible, and they just needed a throwaway line. They needed, like, maybe this would be super cheesy because I'm not a great filmmaker, but like a cascading, like, Sixth Sense style flashback right as Arya's slow motion jumping through the Night King of, like, the first time we see and it getting pulled from Kat's hands, and then it's here and there and is given here and
or like seeing Bran's vision, seeing as he realizes what's happening, maybe through his visions, you could certainly do that.
You could do something like that, and with Ramin Djawadi's music and the loving care that the filmmaker, like I said, I think you could do something that would then make it from the 1%, the 1% of the 1% enjoying it, to like, oh, the vast majority of the fan base is going to roll in and be like, hot damn, that fucking dagger was dynamite. How brilliant that they weaved all that through there. Okay, let's move on. Tiang M. For years now, the general reaction of the White Walkers, the general reading on the White Walkers is that the dead is that they're a metaphor for some impending global doom. For example, climate change, coming to wipe us out while we're all too busy with our petty squabbles to do anything real about it. But I think with the way the Double D's chose to end the Night King and his horde, Game of Thrones starts to ask another question. What of the prophecies and religious hype around mythical figures like Azor Ahai and the Last Hero, prophesied to single-handedly save the realm, were the real distraction? White, this is a text joke. It doesn't work. And on homophones don't
WH
work.
versus WI.
Exactly.
Okay,
there you go. They're white noise, if you will. What if both sides are equally distracted? One is too busy playing the game to realize the apocalypse is on them, while the other is too busy dissecting theories and prophecies about who will sit or stop the apocalypse instead of actually doing something to try to stop it. It's a Gurmian subversion. All your fan theories and dissecting of prophecies from books old and new and putting faith in the mythical ideas got the living nowhere. What actually saved them was a pragmatic badass warrior that spent the last 7 seasons training with the world's greatest fighters, picking up a Valyrian steel dagger and saying, "Not today." What do you think of that, Jim?
I suppose that's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
So it's weird because, Arya is not just like this conventional badass fighter. She's not a Jaime Lannister. She's essentially a magical being at this point.
Right.
So you look at that and say, well, okay, is it really a waste of time to try and dissect all these prophecies if there are forces in this world like that? But yeah, I suppose you could look at it that way.
I guess it's got the way, when I was reading this email, I was thinking about the people that I'm sure we all know, hell, I'm one of them, that we spend a lot of time thinking about and learning new things about climate change, or like we're not happy with the political realities we're facing, but are we doing anything about it? Like sometimes all that intellectual kind of masturbation that kind of leads to this weird apathy can be just as, and like, whereas a person just being like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to, I'm going to take this direct action. I'm going to clean up my corner of the street, or I'm going to start taking my cans recycling. It doesn't really matter, but if everyone did that, it would certainly matter. And the fact that not everyone's doing it is the reason that everyone doesn't do it. So
I think it's a little different here because it does take, it kind of takes the heroes. And if you want to say, okay, well, the heroes are the people analogous to the people in our world who are in a position to actually do something about this, right? Government leaders, executives at companies who are, actively destroying the planet, things like that. Then you can look at the common person in Game of Thrones or our world and say, yeah, it doesn't actually matter. And no matter how many of us were out there like taking a sword to a single white, it would never matter.
Right.
Because more whites are being made. It really takes those heroes, those people who are in a position to do something about it, to step up and kill the Night King.
Yeah.
Right? Like you've got to fix the problem at its root. You can't simply say, well, I'll pitch in and do my part.
Right.
You do have to do that, but you also have to have...
I stabbed my white.
All right. How many whites have you stabbed today? Oh, 3? I got 4.
Right. Meanwhile, Arya can stab them all.
Yeah, with one stab. So
GM, the CEO of GM could stab like 7% of the world's whites.
For sure.
Chooses not to.
He does.
Or she. I don't know.
Either
way, you got to wonder why. Why aren't they doing that? You know, you look at the oil executives. You look at any of the there's a stat that 47% of the world's pollution comes from like the top 100 companies.
That makes sense.
Those 100 people could end half of the pollution. I mean, obviously, they couldn't completely end it without destroying the economy, but I don't know. I mean, they're the Aryas in this situation. They're just picking their teeth with them Valyrian daggers. This is a very interesting email. Chris A. I first direct you to this tweet sent by Vladimir Furtick, the actor who plays the Night King, that was sent early Sunday morning, hours before the episode aired. I'm not sure if you saw this, but it's a tweet where the guy says, and again, this is the stunt coordinator guy who ended up playing the Night King, says, how did the Night King change Craster's babies? By touching them. How did he change Viserion? By touching him. What did the Blood Raven say to Bran Stark in the cave? He touched you. Food for thought. Kind of like giving another subtext of the Night King of being like a child molester.
Okay, this is weird.
It is weird, right? Like it's like but it kind of tracks if you want to go with that. Like this is an evil person touching and robbing things of their innocence or their perceived purpose or their potential. It's kind of a pessimistic way to look at the victims of child abuse. That like they're fucked now.
They're forever marked, Walkers, but forever scarred.
But it is interesting to think about. Chris continues. I, like you, have questions about what Bran was up to in his work state. I also felt like the Night King's narrative fell a bit flat. If this is truly the last we see of him, I'm not sure I 100% bought the motivations Bran stated for the Night King as the sole motivators. I needed more backstory about the Night King and why he's been on the journey through the season. Plus, I felt like this finale, while amazing, was a tad abrupt at the end of the battle in which his army had been so dominant.
Well, whether you believe it or not, you kind of have to go with what they put on screen. Mm-hmm. And so far, that is what they put on screen. They may put something else on screen, something more. I don't know. But so far, I take Bran at his word.
Right. And I just keep on going back to this and put it back. Not to blame Gurm, but to like show that like, look, in the books we know much less about the White Walkers than we do in the show, and there is no Night King, and there is no. It's entirely possible that the Double D's maybe by not making decisions earlier in the series to try that. Because like, again, they had to invent something, right? The easiest thing in the world is to invent a Death Star exhaust port. Mm-hmm. Like, there's an unbeatable thing that's absolutely going to kill the heroes. They can't do dick about it, but it's got a fatal flaw. Like, this is storytelling kind of 101. It's kind of, it's so hackneyed now that you kind of got to layer it up with a bunch of other different things that draw people's attention from the fact that you're essentially pushing a destruct button on this doomsday weapon. But that's one of the only ways you can resolve these type of like unstoppable, insurmountable things. You give the humans a smaller scale thing that they can reasonably achieve through great odds and sacrifice, because just beating the person in a straight up fight's never going to work. So like, I would like to see George do. I'm not even saying this snarkily. I would like to see George do better, because I don't even know that George has really got like how this is going to work in his mind. I think he knows how he wants things to end and how he wants people to react to that ending, but like, how is Jon and Dany going to beat the Night King? They can't just fly dragons up there and incinerate them all. That's going to feel like bullshit. I mean, it's tough. There's a reason the man stopped really writing books 8 years ago. Yeah. Like, this collapsing this giant fucking story back in and getting it to a singularity that is the finish of the Song of Ice and Fire is a really tough challenge that is so far beyond the creator of the damn series himself.
It's easier to write books about the history of the universe that he's created.
Yeah.
Fill in some gaps.
Yeah. Okay, we got another pair of kind of emails that go together. Olivia M. sets it up. I was surprised in the past 7 seasons that we've been working towards the Battle of Winterfell and somehow ended in a victory for the living with all of our favorite characters, including the big ones, and still intact. The first episode of the series began with the White Walkers, and it's been a huge plot line that's been brewing for the entire series. If the Night King plot ends here, then we are left with some holes in the plots that Game of Thrones has been working on for a while. And she mentioned several that we've kind of talked about already. The Azor Ahai prophecy. This prophecy is about someone with Lightbringer who ends the long night. Arya did not have to kill anyone, nor that she loved, nor was a dagger she used on fire. People have been predicting that Jon will kill Dany or vice versa, but again, this prophecy doesn't have to do with the throne, but the long night. In Dany's visions, Dany has a vision of the throne room covered in snow. I guess it could signify Jon, but in my opinion, it would be a far reach. Okay, so Melissa then comes in with some ideas for how we can make these prophecies still be significant. She says, if Jon is the prince that was promised, which the show seems to be leaning into, where is his Lightbringer? Okay, that's another thing that I don't think we've actually talked about, but that's been a big part of this show. Lightbringer, Lightbringer, Lightbringer. Where's the fucking Lightbringer? We didn't see, like, is the dagger Lightbringer?
It's possible.
I believe in this show's version, his Lightbringer is not his sword Longclaw, but a person, his little sister / cousin Arya. So this has been a popular theory that that maybe one way to resolve the prince's promise, and you've got two princes and princes, is that one will be Lightbringer, the physical manifestation of the weapon to destroy the White Walker, and one will be the Azor Ahai, the person who quote unquote wields it. And there's been various versions of that. Jon is the Lightbringer to Dany, that Dany's the Lightbringer to Jon, that Dany's dragons are collectively Lightbringers, et cetera, et cetera. But here's Melissa's version. Jon is the one who gave Arya Needle, which caused Ned to decide to hire Syrio Forel to train her. I know the Not Today line is the most famous, but in episode 1-3, Syrio calls her boy. She retorts, I'm a girl. Then Syrio said the important thing for this theory to work out. Boy, girl, you are a sword. We go through her tutelage under Yoren and the Hound. We get to Braavos. What was the one thing that Arya couldn't bring herself to part with when she was told that she'd have to give up everything from her Stark identity? Of course.
Her face. Oh, that's not it. Her sword.
Yeah. She didn't bury her face under a rock, Jim. She buried her sword Needle.
Obviously.
Now, I know the prophecies about how Lightbringer's forged, or how Lightbringer's forged is pretty specific. It's tempered first in water, then it's tempered in the heart of a lion, then finally in the heart of Azor Ahai's wife, Nissa. Arya's first training was water dancing. Well, there's the water. She then had to escape King's Landing and went on the run from the Lannisters, even getting captured by them and escaping again from the lion. But the blade through the heart, the only person that's taken a knife through the heart that's currently walking around is Jon. That stab is what allowed him to break the Night's Watch vows and for him and Sansa to be able to take Winterfell back. Arya had no intention of going to Winterfell until she heard Jon was there. Arya loves Jon just about more than she loves anyone, and the very first thing she said to him when they reunited was, how did you survive the knife to your heart?
Oof.
I know this will be different in the books, and that the showrunners decided a few years ago that Arya would be the one to kill the Night King for reasons they haven't yet stated. But if one were to need to reverse engineer a good way to make the prophecies, which they've mentioned as recently as episode 702 work, there's a pretty good argument that Jon is the prince that was promised, put his unparalleled weapon to end the long night on her path to be able to bring back the dawn.
Wow.
Again.
Not to shit too hard on this.
Okay. All right.
But if you're not on board with them having told a very obvious and coherent story about this blade throughout the series, you're definitely not going to follow what they're doing here.
Yeah.
This is a very convoluted theory. Extremely.
It's I think it's clean and it tracks and it has a lot of textual evidence, but yeah. Again, there's a lot of toys here on the floor.
Looking at the episodes, I would never have pulled that out, which I think is, let's say hypothetically that this theory is true. I think that's a failure of the show in that case.
Yeah.
Because I'm not picking up what they're putting down.
Especially Syrio Forel, you're not a boy, girl, you are a sword. I
like that line, and it does track in the theory that you built up here.
Yeah.
But connecting all those dots would be very difficult.
It's tricky because I want to say, to give full credit to that Arya would have to refer to herself as a sword, or someone else would have to refer to her as a sword a couple other times in the series, but there's a fine line between foreshadowing and giving away the plot. And, even some really clever twists that George put in this series very early that people eventually guessed, like the fact that Jon is actually a secret Targaryen. I mean, that stayed fairly well hidden for a long time before it became accepted as the capital T truth. And that was really fucking subtle. But once you get, again, a million minds pulling these things over, so I don't know. But then them's the breaks. I don't think it's fair to bury something in the third episode and then 8 seasons later say, remember when Syrio called her the sword? That means she's Lightbringer. And I mean, they can do that, but they have to do a bunch of work in this next episode to have that all tie together.
That's the thing. With this 3-stage reveal, you can keep it subtle for a while, but eventually you got to hit me with it. I mean, and it has to make sense.
It would be nice to have somebody say, what the fuck was anyone because, I'm thinking of Varys, Tyrion, Missandei, Dany, Jon, all of the inner circle has been personally a witness to people talking about the Azor Ahai prophecy. Like when Melisandre came and did it like in front of Dany's throne room, like shouldn't someone be thinking, someone say, well, like, what the fuck was this all about?
Yeah.
You know?
Just have another hearth scene where they're all sitting around and go, so which of us do you think was Azor Ahai?
Right. And the problem,
let them argue over it.
The other problem is like because there's a lot of feedback that I did include involving people saying because I think we had a feedbacker already mentioned this as a throwaway sentence, but like people are saying like, oh, well, the Prince was Promised was going to be the thing that like united the person that unites Westeros, and I'm like, no, that's fucking bullshit because the Prince was Promised is a thousands of year old prophecy about. Or Azor Ahai rather, about like the person who's going to defeat the White Walkers when they come back, when the Long Night comes back again. Like it's not about some petty political thing,
right?
And if so, Aegon the Conqueror was already Azor Ahai because he united Westeros and kept it together for like 300 years. So,
Melisandre just can't let this prophecy go.
Yeah.
It's already been fulfilled. She's looking for that second stage fulfillment of the prophecy.
Yeah. I don't know how old is she because there's like theories that she's hundreds of years old. Like, is she
okay?
I can't tell you right off the top of my head. Is like if the most popular theories put her pre-Aegon, but it'd be funny if she like missed it and she just can't get over it. It's like, hey,
she was only like 4 at the time. Right. She really wanted that to be within her adult lifetime.
Saw her other sister like accurately call Aegon and like just stuck in her craw. Should have been me. Okay, Matt has a couple questions for us. Do you think that the person who kills the Night King was one of the bullet points from Gurm? I can't imagine that wouldn't be one of the main plot points that he left up to the Double Ds.
It sounds like it was.
You think so?
It sounds like it was something that he left up to them, kind of. Like,
well, they're saying
unless
because the theory, they're not a theory. There's this, like
they said they've known it was Arya for a few years, right?
Yeah, but I think that they were talking about like me and like Dan and Dave.
Right,
and I.
That's what I mean. Okay. Yeah.
So you think that they see? I got the opposite take. I think that after my conversation with Kim, or our conversation with Kim especially, I'm of the opinion that this last season is almost entirely straight out of the Dan and Dave's minds.
That's what I'm trying to say. I said it poorly and we interrupted each other. That's where I was going with that.
Okay. Sorry.
So I think we're in agreement.
Okay. I felt like I was a bad straight man for that joke. Or a serious point?
There was no joke.
Okay. So no, I don't think it is. I think there is no Night King in the book. I don't think like George, when they first brought out the Night King, you remember he had a whole blog about like there's a Night King in my book, but there's not exactly a Night King and things are going to be different. But like people were trying to like read those tea leaves back in the day, but it seems like now that we know everything that's happened, like that was a pretty strong disavowal. Like, this part, all this stuff, the White Wall, all this don't expect to see it in the books. Matt continues, do you think that there's sufficient foreshadowing in the book so far to make this a thematically satisfying conclusion to the Night King storyline? Again, Night King not in the story, but if we talk about the terms of the others, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm in a no-win situation because let's say that George had intended for Arya to kill the Night King the entire time. I mean, it's not like there's no textual evidence there. It's not like that would be a complete like out of left wing, but I feel like it probably would be developed better because that's kind of like, George does take us like time and, he can bury things in words a lot easier. He can bury something in front of the camera, but he hasn't done it, right? He might never. Like every year that passes from this point forward, I say that the likelihood of him finishing the series drops off like another 50%. So like in 10 years, hence we're going to be talking about fractional percentages of chances of this getting finished. I mean, was there enough foreshadowing in the show for this? Matt continues. Many people have pointed out that the sneaky assassin is what Arya spent the last few seasons of the show training to be. There wasn't any history between her and Dead, though. So is this still a satisfying conclusion?
I think maybe there was a more satisfying conclusion in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that this was dissatisfying. I think they have done enough with Arya to make me think that she might be, in fact, the only one who really stood a chance against the Night King. I saw somebody point out how the Night King had like superhuman reaction times and prowess, physical prowess. Like, I don't know that Jon could take him in a one-on-one fight, period. No matter whether he's Azor High or he has Lightbringer or not.
Even if all he has to do is touch him with the blade.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is... We saw how fast he is, right? Like, Arya barely, with her stealth assassin skills, got in there and did the job. And it was only really with this one move that, you know, came back and was a nice callback. But I don't know that Jon can do that. I don't know that fucking Beric could have done that, or Jaime or the Hound or anybody.
Yeah, even the last hero... the Legend of the Last Hero said that he needed like 13 companions plus, like, all accounts. There's this verbiage about all accounts agree that it was their alliance with the Children of the Children of the Forest that kind of like swung the tide of the battle. So like you needed a village to defeat the first time, plus you needed to ally with a bunch of mystical tree based warlocks and witches. So
and Arya's as close as we have to that now.
Sure.
Well, except for Bran.
Yeah.
Who helped, I think.
Something.
He gave him the only weapon he has, which is the stare.
It would be nice. Like, I would laugh out loud if someone in the future episode accuses Bran of doing nothing and he does, like, that Leonard Nimoy, like, didn't I? I mean, that, he can just, like, I was like, my eyes were milky white the whole battle.
Yeah.
Are you sure I did do nothing, John? John, whose dragon reared up for no fucking good reason, sort of biting your head off. John, oh, I did nothing. Oh, okay.
And then Sansa says, "God damn it, Bran, you never help with the dishes." And he says, "Don't I?"
Yeah.
And his eyes roll back.
Right. How do you know your scullery maid would have done the dishes tonight had not been for my influence, my guiding hand?
But yeah, I do think there are potentially more satisfying arcs out there for other characters, being the killer of the Night King, but I did not have a problem with the way they went.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that most people are disappointed because George has talked a lot of shit about Tolkien specifically for this, like having these faceless, ultimately evil, no shades of gray, no shades of light, like, or no shades of black, or just shades of gray is what I'm trying to say. And the show did not subvert that part at all. Like, the Night King died more or less a face of evil with a stated purpose to just destroy everything that's light and warm and living about the world.
And you know, we have emails here that speak to this. People, I think, are dissatisfied that there wasn't more to the Lightbringer stuff, more to the Azor Ahai prophecies, and I kind of don't blame them for that. Like, say what you want about. Maybe it'll be different in the books, but in the show they made a big deal about the prophecies. You can expect that people are going to want to see how those prophecies came true. And if they subvert that part of it as well, you're going to have some mad people.
I mean, it's expectations, right? The reason that, like, No Man's Sky was panned, like, if that thing just came out for $20 on Steam with no fanfare, people would be holy fucking shit, look at this, it's the new Minecraft.
Yeah, and I bet they'll expand on it, and this is going to be awesome someday.
But when they promise the moon and give you a moon rock, people get pissed. When George comes out and says, Tolkien's great, and I don't want to take anything away from him, but and you look at Tolkien and be like, okay, Sauron didn't want to destroy all of humanity. He was jealous of him and the boss before him was jealous of the creative powers of God and wanted to create their own race of people to prove that they could do just as good a job and rule over them. It's a one-to-one, I know Tolkien says this was an allegory, but it's kind of a satanic allegory, right? Like, that is a lot more rich than what we have with the Night King. Because the orcs, the orcs, they had culture. They could speak. They had desires. When Sauron wasn't there with their lidless wreath flame eye and the whip, they had their own devices and their own games and their own sport. Like, that's better in every way than what we got with the Night King and the White Walkers. Now, the books, George could pull this out. Like, he could have a completely nuanced and, like, super, like, we've talked about it in ad infinitum on this podcast about all the different possibilities of shit. I wrote a book with a couple chapters in it with Anthony about some of the things that the Night King or the others could be getting up to in the books, but on the show, not so much.
So you mentioned how in the books there's far less information even than in the show about the White Walkers. and no Night King at all, do you think that there's a bigger hurdle to jump here for George to embed some of that information to make their ending more meaningful?
I mean,
is it going to take a lot more groundwork being laid in these next 2 books?
Well, because like, you know, that's the thing with him being a gardener. He hasn't gardened a shit. Like this thing has not even sprouted yet. Like we don't like. Let me tell you things in the show we know about the White Walkers are not in the books. The White Walkers are capable of making symbols. The White Walkers
that basic, huh?
The White Walkers can have to create themselves by stealing children or having children donating, and then the Night King touches them, they turn. The fact that there is a Night King, the fact that the Night King was created by the children of the forest by like all those things are things we do not know in the books.
That's what I mean. It seems like there's more work to be done in the books to have that kind of nuanced, satisfying ending than there was even in the show, and they didn't do it in the show.
So there's like on the pro side, there isn't all of that like things that George would have to like, you know, he's not restricted by the same rules on the show. So all those things about the Night King and the origins of the White Walkers, like he come up with something that has built-in better mechanics or could tie in better. And you know, also he can just so he doesn't have any of that stuff to hold him back, but also he's 5 books into a 7-book series, and we really haven't learned anything more about the White Walkers since like book 2. So it is I don't know. He's got some pros, he got some cons, but yeah, it seems like fleshing this out and doing what he set out to accomplish, which is like outdoing Tolkien at his own game with his own world building, is a big task that he has to set out ahead of him. Patrick M., what will happen to the Night's Watch now that the Night King has been defeated? I'm assuming that the Night King is gone forever from Westeros, having been slain by Arya at the Battle of Winterfell. Do we know if all the Night's Watch men came back with Dolorous Ed to defend Winterfell, or do you think that some remained at Castle Black, each watched by the sea or the Shadow Tower?
Oh, I would say dereliction of duty if they didn't come back with Dolorous.
Right.
Because you're not helping up at the wall anymore.
Right. I think they actually said that. That was a direct quote in the first episode, that like there's no, you know.
Yeah, no point in being at Castle Black.
Yeah. So do I think so? If the White Walkers are gone,
although let me ask you this: they left from Eastwatch, right?
Yes.
So they wouldn't even have had time to go back to Castle Black to say, "Hey, we saw this wall fall. Hey, the dead are on the march. Let's go."
No, but like
could they send a raven? They don't have any pocket ravens. They're not.
But Eastwatch is a fully equipped castle with a maester of its own, and yeah, absolutely, they could send ravens.
The castle didn't come down with the wall.
I mean,
I couldn't tell you. I didn't look at the scene again.
I think it's likely that like with the wall collapsing and the fact that there are like it'd be like, you know, we have cell phones, right? So like this happened in our world, you'd be like, well, they would just send a cell phone, and someone's like, well, can you prove that there was functional cell phone? Like, okay, yeah, settle down. They got ravens. The ravens will work.
It will be hilarious though, because the ravens will take a while.
Yeah.
So they'll just roll up after the battle's already fought and won, right?
Right.
And they'll be like, man, what happened here?
Right. So yeah, no, now whether Night's Watch disbands, that's been a, you know, just even last week we considered several ideas of what might become the Night Watch, or, you know, maybe it becomes a whole, like maybe the Night's Watch becomes like, an official standing army for the 7 kingdoms instead of everybody having their own lords, like that's now the guardian of the realm, like they actually mean it, like we are a force. But that's like they
meant it 1,000 years ago.
They'd go from an apolitical force to an explicitly political force, you know. That's the whole tension of Night Watch, is they have a, you know, large impressive army and lands of their own and a bunch of fortifications and castles and this giant wall, but they're forbidden to partake in the political and military affairs of the other kingdoms. Like once you go up there, it's like all you can do is guard the wall, and that's it. So like, but I mean, shit.
So are you saying that Sansa's not going to get her wish about the North being independent?
Well, I mean, the North has nothing to do with the. Maybe that's the way to go. Jon and Sansa just build a wall at the neck.
It's a shorter wall.
And they take the wildlings that don't like kneelers in the South, and they take and they say, okay, your new job is to guard the chillness that is the North. We want to have our chill society. It's not crazy up here. Down south, they can do whatever the fuck they want. So, but yeah, no, why do you need a Night's Watch if the Night King is dead, the White Walkers are dead, and the wall has fallen?
You shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, it's like there's a lot of theories that say that like now that if the Night King is truly dead, the seasons should normalize because Martin said there's no cosmological or planet, geographical reason that this stuff is happening. It's all magical. So like if the forces of winter have defeated, maybe you have traditional seasons and the wall will start to continue to collapse and melt into nothing. I don't know.
Planning is gonna be so much easier.
Yeah, you just know, like, hey, you got 3 months to plant and 3 months to harvest, or 3 months to grow and 3 months to harvest and 3 months to, chill in your greenhouse. And then the winters won't last generations anymore. All right, Michelle, could I please pick your mind on some major plot holes? Mainly, how did a wooden box keep a very violent wight locked in all the way to King's Landing, but the near dust and bones of dead Starks managed to break through stone coffins? Do you think it's because the wights are
the proximity of the Night King made them stronger
when they're near the Night King?
Okay, great minds here.
Does he have like some kind of zombie Bluetooth and it weakens after 32 meters? I mean,
that's a fair question. It was just the rule of cool on that.
Yeah, and then I did we even talk about this last season? It's like also wouldn't it be super funny if like this was a Michigan J Frog situation where Jon brings this corpse down to King's Landing and the Night King just turns him off?
Oh, okay.
Because remember, that's the whole thing that this frog would sing and dance for this one guy, but every time he tried to throw it on a talk show, the frog would just sit there and be a frog. And
I didn't know about that part.
But yeah, wouldn't it be funny if he opens the box and it's just a dead body?
Yeah.
And they're like,
we've seen dead bodies before,
right.
Jon.
Yeah,
we've made a whole bunch of them.
There's probably a few in the black cells right now. Moving on, Michelle wonders, as Jon has now fought the Night King and Whites for countless times, and presumably was involved in strategizing for this battle, surely he knew that riding the Dothraki out like that was sending them into sure death.
Who are they talking about?
It says Jon. Jon's fought the Night King and the Whites many times before.
Yeah, I don't think Jon rode the Dothraki out. I think the Dothraki rode themselves out.
They rode themselves out?
Yeah.
They were on the front lines and...
They got gung ho because they saw their flaming swords. They're like, hell yeah, let's do this.
We can end it. We got this, bros.
Yeah, we're talking about a culture that has multiple killings at weddings. They have some bloodlust in them. They wanted to get this battle underway.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if you want to believe that the Dothraki did that, and then Jorah's like, okay, YOLO, I guess I'll go along with them. I think that no, this is just dumb. This is dumb strategy. Like, I mean, on the other hand,
it's a little of both, I think.
Like Jon could also say, like, oh, the army of the dead, like, we fought them, and we always fought them on foot, so maybe like a cavalry charge, and maybe it's the horses needed like they needed armor that was studded with like dragon glass, so they could just ride right through and just tear through the armies.
Hell yeah.
But also someone pointed out that the Dothraki were still using their araks, which are just steel swords. Like, until Melisandre set them on fire, they intended to go out there. Like, was Gendry like, hey, I know you like your sword. I know you do.
But we really need to deck it out.
But you need, look, can I interest you in a dragonglass version? It's like, nah.
Can I interest you in the only weapon that is effective against your enemy?
You Westerosi with your straight-ass swords and you're wearing steel armor. Look, we're going to show you how it's done in Essos.
Yeah.
And just go out there. So yeah, in that universe, I absolutely believe they get their swords lit in fire and they just like, oh sure, fuck it, let's do this.
You know what they needed is they needed that contraption that Ash builds, an Army of Darkness, with on the front of his car, just his spinning blades of dragon glass.
Yes,
that would have cleaned up.
Yeah, if only we had a Hodor still alive, he could like twirl like a 30. Yeah, he could be the car essentially, and he just twirls a 30-foot staff with dragon glass tips. And finally, how did we see Daenerys wield a sword to fight off loads of whites, but Sansa couldn't even use her little dagger to stab a dusty bag of bones? I think this came out of a conversation with Kim that like, no, it wasn't. I was streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/baldmove, last night, and there's several people that opined that they were reading that there was some production
cut scene,
that there's some notes that there was actually several cut scenes, and there was like some Sansa and Tyrion heroics that they cut for time, and I'm like, what the fuck? Because
that sucks. Yeah,
I almost said this, but I was I already knew I was going to be accused from Hell to Breakfast about nitpicking, so I'm like, I'm not going to go into the esoteric art of editing. But I thought that there was a couple what felt like missing or blown edits, or kind of pretty noticeable edits. Like I said, they told the story of, Tyrion and Sansa deciding to make the last stand. They make their way to recognizable characters we care about to make that last stand, and then the last stand never happens. And then we cut to them, being victorious. And apparently, there was a couple scenes that they cut for time. That makes no fucking sense to me. This is an hour and a half long.
It's on.
Put another 5 minutes into it.
Yeah, I don't know what they're. Yeah, I guess they don't have like fucking commercials and stuff. And if you're going an hour and a half already,
it's all budget.
12 seconds is not going to make a difference.
Yeah, and who said you know what? Just take Ghost out of last episode. Boom. Take the 3 seconds of Ghost out. Pay for a little bit more rubber skeleton time. You're good to go. Like I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Alex rather, with 3 episodes of 80+ Mimets. That's the new way we mark time here on Game of Thrones. Mimets. With 80+ Mimets left before we wrap up the story, I've seen quite a few think pieces and even expert YouTubers, including AltShiftX, say that there sure seems like a lot of screen time left for just the battle with Cersei, the Clegane Bowl, and the fallout or aftermath. Wait a second. The Clegane Bowl. What? I'm not getting a Clegane Bowl? Fuck.
Wait, that's not set up, man.
I was promised the Clegane Bowl. Are we muted?
It's a different input. It's all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Damn it. I have a Clegane Bowl button and it misfired.
Yeah.
And the fallout or aftermath of it all. It seems like 2 episodes of that length at best. Some, including AltShiftX, have proposed that we have one or more major unforeseen twists coming, and that might possibly still include the Night King coming back, or other major characters possibly taking his place, and some prophecy-spinning twist. I'm not sure how I could see that happening now, or how I'd even feel about it, but giving Game of Thrones penchant for subverting expectations, what do you guys think?
I don't think that they have a lot of screen time left, because I think all the things you listed to make them satisfying we're going to have to linger on them for a minute.
We have to linger on the Battle of Winterfell.
We do. Yeah, we still have to get through the aftermath of this battle. There's just so much shit, I think, still left to do in this series to make it satisfying as a conclusion to one of the most epic tales ever told, in my opinion. So I don't know. We just have a fundamental disagreement on that.
Yeah. I mean, you could spend a good 60 minutes just dealing with the aftermath of the series proper, because you have to give people... I mean, you can't end on a cliffhanger, which is kind of how Game of Thrones typically does. Like, it ends on a cliffhanger or like a setup for like, oh my God, it's going to be great for next season. And you can't do that this time. You have to actually satisfy and explain and give people resolutions.
And not just plot resolutions, but emotional resolutions.
Yes,
like, all of that takes time.
Yeah.
I'm a guy who likes the Fly episode of Breaking Bad a hell of a lot.
Right.
And that was an entire hour that was nothing but delving into the guilt of a single character. So, like, they could spend an hour and a half on the resolution between Dany and Jon and who's going to be the king and queen. And if it's compelling, and they need that time to do it, I'm all for it.
Right. Yeah, it's possible that, somehow the Night King comes back, because that's the horror movie way to do it, right? You think you beat the guy in the second act, and then you go on to defeat the quote-unquote real threat, and then the guy you thought you defeated pops out of a pool of lava, and he's a glowing red-hot skeleton now, and he's pissed, and he's stabbed somebody. I mean, it could, but, like, I am trying to process this by moving the fuck on. Like, this did not go the way I expected, the way many people expected, but it's the way it went down. There are still perfectly... Like, I got so many takes. I can't remember when I said this, or maybe I said it last night on the stream, but, like, there's 2 takes I don't get. The one take that's like, that denies there's any problems with the episode this week, and they say they were fully satisfied and they saw no problems and everybody's just nitpicking. Like, that doesn't seem intellectually honest. But the other side of that dark coin is the people that said, after I saw The Long Night, I'm out on the series.
Huh.
I'm like, you are not going to watch 3 more episodes of this show? Like,
they're long episodes though.
They are. It's going to burn an hour and a half of your fucking Sunday night. I know we're all in a hurry to get to bed so we can get up on Monday and start our shit lives all over again, but an extra half hour might be out of your time budget. I get it. Barry's still going on. That's really good. We're excited about Chernobyl. Like, come on. I know our TV schedules are tight here, but like that seems bizarre that you would. It's like walking out in the last 15 minutes of Avengers Endgame, you know? Like, Jesus Christ, you just don't want, I mean, hang on to see.
You don't want to see this through, right?
Like, even if this is a vicious car crash, don't you want to just kind of like, you know, see how fucked up the bodies are going to look? And
I mean, there's a certain point where you're pot committed, you know, and even if you know you have a shit hand, you play it out because maybe,
right?
Because just maybe there's a chance. So you gotta stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, then if this was like 3 more seasons to go,
right?
But 3 more episodes, like I just feel like a lot of this stuff is hyperbole, and but then the other thing is like the next 3 episodes are great and puts a big smile on everybody's face and pays off a lot of the character moments that we actually care, you know, that everyone universally cares about. Then this might be remembered as just yet another road bump and a kind of bumpy last 3 seasons of the Game of Thrones. So, like, I think that's probably more likely than just completely shitting the bed, honestly. Like, to come up with something that doesn't satisfy anyone, but I don't know. We'll see. Thomas O. I sat here watching this last week's episode, and it struck me that 2 of the biggest Lord of the Light parishioners fall as their purpose was fulfilled. As far as I could remember, there was 3 people that were brought back to life by what the show has you believe the Lord of Light. Beric, Melisandre, kept alive by a necklace, and Jon. Is it a stretch to think that Jon is not meant to end the show on the Iron Throne, but instead is being used by the Lord of Light to help usher in the next queen/king?
So he's Lightbringer.
Yeah,
he's
well,
the sword.
I think what
weapon.
Tom's is saying is like, if his purpose was to defeat the Night King, why doesn't Jon stop functioning? As if he's like the same way that Beric ran out of his Beric juice right at the time where Arya, after he protected Arya, and the same way Melisandre ran out of her Melisandre juice after the battle.
I mean, that's an interesting way to frame it. Beric got stabbed a whole bunch,
sure,
and keeled over like a mortal human would.
And the guy who brought him back to life every time died last season.
Melisandre made the conscious choice to take off this necklace powering her life and died of old age. To say that they ran out of their magical juice in those moments, I think is a little disingenuous.
Yeah, especially since they could have told that story, like I said on the pod, like if Melisandre's necklace stopped glowing and she just resignedly pulls it off, like knowing that the Lord of the Light has withdrawn his protection, this is just a formality. But no, she pulls the thing off, throws it aside. It stops glowing several seconds after she does that.
Yeah, she made a conscious choice to die there. I don't think that they ran out of juice.
Right.
And so I don't know why we would expect Jon to keel over dead. I've kind of never understood why people were hypothesizing that.
Right. All right. Jessica S. I wanted to hear your thoughts about the scenes in the crypts. I read up on the events that inspired the Rains of Castamere on A World of Ice and Fire, not being a book reader, a few weeks ago, so the fate of House Rain is still fresh in my mind. One thing that surprised me while reading about it is the massacre of the entire house was at the hands of Tywin in his younger days when his father Tytos was still Lord of Casterly Rock. House Rain offended the Lannisters by not promptly repaying their debts, so Tywin marched on them. The Rains tried to backpedal to no avail and take shelter in Castamere, which is a fortress that's almost entirely underground in the many mines that the Rains had emptied of silver and gold. Tywin seals the entrances to Castamere and then floods the halls. All the men, women, and children of House Rain then drown. The parallels between this and the crypts at Winterfell give me pause. In both sieges, the weakest of the civilians are taking shelter, and when they think they're in the safest place they can be, secured and secluded, they find themselves trapped in their shelter, powerless to save themselves against an unforeseen and horrible demise. Surely Tyrion knows the story of House Rain all too well, and I'm surprised that he didn't see a catastrophe like this coming. Thoughts? I guarantee Dave and Dan have no fucking clue about this detail. There's no way there's no way they read The World of Ice and Fire that came out like what 2.5, 3 years ago. Like I just think that they there's a couple public interviews where they've gotten like some really basic plot points about Game of Thrones. Like I don't think they read Game of Thrones in their off season. Like I think they're fans and they did poured a lot of time and effort into adapting this work, but like I don't know how much of like they're not fans the way that we're obsessive fans. Like, I don't think they're buying the World of Ice and Fire. They probably have people read it for them, but the fact that they would pull that out or even be aware of it, I don't know. And they don't. And Tyrion doesn't know anything that they don't know. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's the fact if because the thing is, if Tyrion were to, like, what would he say? Would he refuse to go down to the crypts? Would he say like, oh no, like it's safer to be up here with the army of the dead. They might flood us down there once they take over, kill every last living person in the castle. Like, also, what would he say? Like, oh, this gives me uneasy and dread because this is just like the fate of the Rains of Castamere. Because then they'd have to sit and explain what actually happened to the Rains of Castamere, which I guess they could do. But
yeah, I mean, if they really want to keep these people safe,
yeah,
the only option I think is to put them on horses and keep them south of Winterfell.
Yeah,
and if shit goes bad in Winterfell, they just ride south.
That's what
and
they
abandon
did.
Winterfell.
That's why the Knights of the Vale had no horses. They took all the horses of them. They put all the best women and children and old people.
The best ones.
So the ones in the crypt are just like.
How did they determine the best ones? I want to know.
Everyone knows. Those are these are
if we have to tell you, yeah.
Yeah, these are just the malcontents, the complainers, the whiners.
And that's why Tyrion ended up down there.
Exactly. Yeah, Tyrion, Sansa, both.
Oh, you don't want to be down in the crypts, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you're not getting the horse then. Down the crypts.
Yeah. They actually cut that scene for time. There was a scene of the Sansa and Tyrion both complaining that, like, well, if we know we're going to be shoved down in the crypts, we would have taken the horses.
Yep.
They thought they were going to have a role to play. Lauren W., do you think that the crypt was broken up, she's referring to the white smashing her way out of the grave, to maybe reveal the silver harp? Parenthetically, she's talking about... I'll explain here in just a minute.
Okay, I have no idea what you're talking about.
But spoiler if the books... but I'm a spoiler as far as the books and all the info I can get from them. Could this prove that Jon is a Targaryen somehow? So there's a theory that... There's a lot of these like quasi legends and some of the stories that old Nan tell, and some of the kind of like the myths and legends of Winterfell itself that says, because Winterfell is famous for a bunch of different reasons. It's built by Bran the Builder, but also has this like extensive glass gardens, like a greenhouse, and that's how like Winterfell feeds its people throughout the long winters, because they can still grow like on a limited scale fresh fruits and vegetables and things. It's not just their larder; they can get like vitamin C essentially. But also the castle is kept warm by geothermal heat vents. It's like cleverly constructed so this heat from the earth rises. And one of the legends, because they don't know fucking plate tectonics in Westeros, or at least no one but the Maesters does. Is that there's a dragon, like a ancient dragon that's sleeping beneath Winterfell. So some people have taken that and like this whole R plus L equals J stuff, and the fact that, like how would Jon prove that he is the legitimate, son of such and such? And one of the ideas, they're square the idea that there is a dragon buried underneath Winterfell. And this other plot point is that there is some kind of token of Rhaegar's affection buried with Lyanna, perhaps his famous silver harp, perhaps Rhaegar himself is interred with her, something that would prove that like, oh, this was actually an up and relationship and not a kidnapping / rape situation. So if the show had laid tracks to that, and like and I can't remember if they conspicuously showed Lyanna's like Lyanna's tomb is the one that's broken open, and someone was like cleaning up this in the next episode, and they found this exquisite silver harp. I could see it, but I guess more than ever, I don't see how Dany and Jon just immediately start up their beef about the succession after this thing that they've gone through. Like, how the fuck do you go immediately back to squabbling about who rules after you went through the situation where you both saved each other, and like either one of you could get died at either point, that Jon's sister / cousin is the one that ended this all? Like, I mean, how can Dany? Yeah,
it does seem a little petty.
Wouldn't that bring Dany down a notch? The fact that your fucking largest army and the dragons didn't do shit. We needed a little girl with magic ninja training.
Maybe she should be queen.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's I feel it's not like they should, turn around with piles of bodies behind them and say, so about that queen king business. But it is a central thing that I think needs to be resolved. Yeah. I don't know if they can immediately have that conversation, but soon they'll have to. And I think Sansa might actually be the one to push on that, because she basically was told the North has no chance of seceding essentially from my 7 kingdoms. In no words, she was told that. So she, I'm sure, wants a resolution to that. She'll probably push.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually think Sansa might be even worse because from her perspective, if it wasn't for the North and Winterfell in particular, like the entire world would end. And
For
like
sure.
the Stark line, like it's like I can't even imagine how offensive it would be to have to kneel to a southern king, like queen, as even though Dany had, her part that she played in this war, like it would be downright offensive to be like, what the fuck? We did the vast majority of the dying. Our ancestral home was the ground zero for this defeat. Our dead ancestors were fucking turned into abominations during this war. Like we've suffered a lot and we gave a lot and we were instrumental. There's no freaking way that we're gonna go back to being just a vassal. So because that's kind of her thing. Like what is like, how can I make sure that this doesn't happen again? How can I make sure the North is protected? And it's going to be, kind of like we talked about the last few weeks. It's going to be Jon and Dany trying to figure out how to smooth this over in a way that makes everybody else happy. Because I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I think Jon is going to say, look, I don't even want this.
Yeah.
And now if you and Sansa want to fight over this, like I will try and be some kind of arbiter in the whole thing, but I don't want to be the king.
Sure.
He's never wanted to be the king.
But I mean, the other thing is like it's also a kind of a done story because if he was this goes back to all the other bullshit we always talk about. But if Jon was the king of the North, and I think he was, right? Everybody elected him by crying "King of the North."
That's how kings happen. They get elected.
That's how we should. They get chanted into effect in the great halls of North. Then he's entirely in his power to abdicate to some other power.
Yeah, and I would argue he's already done so.
And the only ones that could stop that are the great lords that would be like, well, fuck that, we're going to take over, and we're going to and I'm going to put my hand in for the king of the North, and they're all dead apparently.
Yeah.
So like, I just don't see like Sansa can say what she wants, but she's the Lady of Winterfell. He's the king of the North, and he's just the king that knelt again.
How about Robin Arryn?
He's not. He's actually a completely separate kingdom, the Vale. So whatever. Whatever the Vale does, it's like the River Runs. Okay. They're not actually part.
I thought they were part of the North.
They're allied.
Gotcha.
And they've been allied since like back in the Baratheon rebellion days. So, Jordan T. So how about the army of the living now? We know that they got to be dwindled down to almost nothing. It doesn't sound so good for the inevitable battle with Cersei. Well, I think there may be a backup army that most have forgotten about. We know Ilaria is still locked up in the cells of King's Landing watching her daughter's body wither away. How does that help things? Well, I think we're going to see Yara take what few men she has left and go on a covert Squid Team 6 type mission to infiltrate the Red Keep and rescue Ilaria. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were on their way to pick up the Dornish army when Euron burned the fleet, which leads me to believe that there's still an entire army down there trying to ready to go. We've talked about the Dornish army. This is the first time someone's put forth a plausible theory for how they could be put into action. We've seen Yara pull off similar stunts in her attempts to rescue Theon from Winterfell, and I think it would be a cool callback to Bronn's famous "Give me 10 good men and I'll impregnate the bitch" line, because he might even help on the mission. I find it hard to believe that one of the Seven Kingdoms would just be ignored from this final season. Dorne has to have a role to play in the endgame here, right?
I think that could be cool, yeah.
Could be cool, but like I really wouldn't get your hopes up on it.
I don't even know if Yara is aware that Ilaria is alive.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't think that's the interesting question. The interesting question is if Yara showed up to rescue her, would you be like, how the fuck did she know about this? Like, I think that like with spies and intelligence and maybe that you could just assume that she'd found out somehow.
Okay. I almost think they have to show that, otherwise it just seems like she lied to Theon about where she was going.
Yeah. Well, or maybe she like felt guilty about sitting there, or maybe she hears that Theon went out like a hero and now is like galvanized to like do her part.
That's what I mean. They have to show something. They have to let us know why she chooses to do what she didn't say she was going to do the last time we saw her.
So here's the thing. Yara's not a coward. And her stated goal was to go back. I don't have enough to provide any kind of real help at Winterfell, and I don't have any ships to get him there in the first place. What I'm going to do is go back to Iron Islands and take it so there's a refuge, like a fallback spot for the living and the dragons, where they'll be safe from the Night King for a time that we can, once the Night King's defeated, then the only reason Yara would have to hang back and not do anything, especially when we're talking about the Squid Team 6, like, just give me 10, 20 good men and you can do this thing, would be cold feet, cowardice, wanting to test the political winds. So I think this theory checks out. It's just that, look, I would like to encourage everyone that's disappointed in this last episode to declare fan bankruptcy. Just, you could do it like Michael Scott. Just, I declare fan bankruptcy. And then just you got a clean slate and see if you can enjoy these next 3 episodes on their own terms without any expectations. Because what I see a lot of people doing is doubling down. They owe $10,000 to the fan theory casino, and they
put it all in black.
They put their fan theory mortgage, and they're betting it on black. I'm like, no. Declare fan bankruptcy, and you might be pleasantly surprised. Don't mortgage the fan theory house, okay? Don't let yourself get radicalized by what the Double Ds are doing to your favorite franchise. Unless you're just out. Unless these people that say they're out are actually out, and I wish you guys well. That's not an option for me. I've got a contractual obligation to do these shows at this point. So what would happen if we just stopped? If we did that?
I mean, I don't think there's anything anybody could do about it.
There was a podcast that rage quit 3 years ago. Said that I forget what point.
After what?
It was in season.
Was it the way they handled Dorne?
I think it was after season 5, and they just said, and it was one of the bigger ones. It was on a top probably 10, 12 podcasts, and they said, we're not going to do this anymore.
Huh.
That'd be bonkers. But yeah, I'm not. Again, just 3 more episodes. Let's see
we'll
how
get through
it goes. Final email, Travis C. The biggest hanging threads I see are the scraps of John and Danny's army versus the Golden Company, Danny and John figuring out their shit, the Mountain versus the Hound, Jaime or someone else kills Cersei. Aside from these possible loose ends, I don't see what else could fill these next 3 episodes. You know what? We actually kind of already did this. I think we're just done. So that's the podcast. Thanks for everyone for the feedback. Again, I encourage everyone to declare some fan bankruptcy, work out a payment plan with your fan theory creditors, and move on with your life and see if they can't get you excited in this next episode because after this one it's the penultimate and then the finale. Mm-hmm. So let's just clean slate this thing. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised, and they'll take all these threads that we've seen that are all over the place that could be picked up, and with the right monologue, the right set of flashbacks, the right Bran doing his wide-eyed thing, the right scene of Sam doing something at the Citadel, they could actually make it better. But let's not expect that. Let's just, my now modest hope is that we have some nice resolution between Jon and Dany. Something nice for Brienne, Jaime and Tyrion having some kind of thematically appropriate either end point for their character to be signed off on the series, and that Cersei and her crew. Oh yeah, the Clegane Bowl's got to happen. Yeah. My button's broke, but
Sansa's got
hype, air horns, all that kind of stuff.
Sansa's got to get something good.
Sansa got to get something good, and Cersei's got to be served out finally. Mm-hmm. That's it. I don't even need it to Valonqar, get that word out of your fucking mouths. Get that word out of your mouths. I can't wait to see someone twist the word Valonqar into meaning anything.
Yeah, a dire wolf.
Yeah, right. Well, it's Nymeria. How would you prove that Nymeria was younger than any other dire wolf pup? They found it sucking on the dead mother's teeth. Maybe Ghost is the runt. You can say that he was but
cut it open, count the rings.
Yeah, there you go. After Nymeria dies, they cut her open. They count her direwolf rings. They find out that she was the youngest sister of the pups, and that she's the Valonqar, and a gender bending cross species fulfillment of fucking Game of Thrones prophecy. And that's what's going to happen. You heard it here first. Game of Thrones at baldmove.com. We'll be back Sunday night for the Instant Take and Instant Talk podcast if you are a club member, and we'll see what happens. Until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.